Well, thank you. This is the last stretch, so 3 more talks and that's it. So thank you for having me. I'm Karina Ramos Musalem. I'm a professor at the Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate Change at UNAM in Mexico City. And I'm gonna talk to you about a project that I've been doing with Bruce Cornwell, Sarah Gilly, and Matt Matlock at Scripps. And Amelia Thelanderson, who's a graduate master's student in the University of Gothenburg that came to Mexico in an exchange program. Okay, so my objectives for today, and I was kind of following last year's format, which I really liked, about 2 questions. So the first one, I guess the first question we had to ask last year was, what is the value of seafloor pressure observation? So I'll start with an example of that, and for that I'll talk about adjoint model. And I'd say that they provide a direct way of measuring wind and other forcing along the coast through the inverse problem, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And the other thing is that I'll show you an example of what processes cause the variation of seafloor pressure. And for that, I'll give you an example of topographically induced modifications to the generation and propagation of coastal track waves and other signals after we have a very idealized wind event in the Southern California and Northern Baja Peninsula. Okay. Yeah. So for the first part, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I wanted to mention adjoint models. Not because I'm going to show you results of one, but because a project on that motivated what I'm going to show you today. And so hopefully we can, see the value of using them, not with sea surface height, as I'm going to show you, but with bottom pressure maybe. So for those who don't know what an adjoint model is, we usually have forward perturbation model, which essentially we perturb the model or the equations or the numerical equations with some perturbation, and we see what happens, right? So these models show where and when the system responds to a specific perturbation. So this can be the wind blowing or a pressure gradient or etc. Heat fluxes. I don't know. Adjoint models, on the other hand, they show you where and when perturbations in the model forcing would lead to a specific response, right? So this is kind of another way. So for example, if I observe sea surface height somewhere, I see this variability, and I want to through this inverse adjoint model, see where, for example, the wind had to blow so that I can explain the variability that I'm seeing, right? Or where did I have a pressure gradient, or what current did I have? Or so you can solve for many or evaluate all the processes affecting sea surface height. For example, winds, eddies, currents, topography, or stratification, or whatever. And the good thing is that you can quantify their contributions, right, to explain and predict the sea surface height that you're seeing. And so the idea is that maybe we can do the same thing with, for example, pressure, if you have pressure time series. Okay, and so I guess what motivated what I'm gonna talk about a little bit later is that there's this paper by Ariane Verdi and my other collaborators that came out in 2014. And what they were looking at was, around here, it's Port St. Louis, which is a tidal gauge station. And they were trying to see what was the forcing that would drive the variability of sea surface height that their models sees around here, right? And so what I'm showing here is a figure from that paper. It's the sensitivity of sea surface height to a longshore wind stress. So where did the wind had to blow to see the variability that I'm seeing at different times, right? So here it's where did the wind had to blow 1 hour before I see what I'm seeing in sea surface height, 2 hours, 4 hours, etc. Right? And so obviously, like the first thing that came up was like, well, local winds seem to be important, sure. That's why they have colors. I guess blue color means that the wind is blowing in. So this has directions, right? So blue would mean that I have a positive sea surface height, then the wind has to be blowing, I guess, to the south, and the other way around or something, right? But the important thing about this was that, and it was not the main point of the project, and that's why I'm here today, is that there's this little bay. Well, it's not a little bay actually, but there's this bay that is in the Baja Peninsula that lights up in sensitivity, right? So I guess what was puzzling, it's called Sebastián Vizcaíno Bay. So I'll be calling it SVB. And so what was puzzling is that how or what are these signals that can, like the travel, like the wind, why is the wind blowing over this bay just 1 hour before? Important to explain sea surface height variability in in Port St. Louis, right? And so it has to be a signal that travels very fast. And so, yeah, we were just puzzled, and it was something that was out of the scope of that paper. And so we just kept working on it afterwards, right? And it was not only 12 hours. I mean, they also saw it a couple of days after too. And so what I'll try to show you today is how we try to solve this mystery, and how are these signals generated, and how do they travel along the coast and through the domain. Okay, so this is the bay. I just wanted to put this picture because it's pretty. But essentially, yeah, this is the bay. This is the Gulf of California. Around here, it's the border between Mexico and the US. Okay, so yeah, so this is where the second example starts. So I'll try to show you what is the effect of the bay in the regional circulation after we have a wind pulse. So instead of looking at real winds, which we want to narrow down the problem and just say like, okay, if the wind blows very quickly over the bay, or really, okay, I'll show you. We want to see what happens, right? Because we want to excite as many frequencies as we can. That's why we did a very short pulse. And yeah, I'll tell you what signals are generated at the bay and how do they travel through the domain. And I'll show you just a little bit of what is their signature in bottom pressure, which is the link to what we're all doing here. I have to say that I haven't really looked at bottom pressure because this is something that we're hoping to explore, and maybe you have some ideas of whether this can be done or not. Okay, so to do this, what we set up was a very idealized MIT GCM model. So this is not an adjoint model. This is a forward regular model that solves the Navier-Stokes equations. And so, yeah, this is a forward model. And what we do is that we have a wind, or first of all, this is the domain. Maybe I should go back. Sorry. This is our whole domain. There are open boundaries here. And the model starts from rest. And the only forcing that we have is it's a wind event or a wind pulse that lasts 3.5 hours. And we can see here, so it ramps up. And then after 3.5 hours, there is no more forcing and no more energy going into the model. It is stratified, and the stratification is, I mean, it comes from very average data, but it is horizontally uniform. So it is stratified, but the stratification horizontally it is uniform. But the bathymetry is real. Well, I mean, it's real for one of the for one of the runs, because what I'm going to show you is the differences. So these were interested in the effect of the bay. I'm going to show you what happens when you have numerical models and you can just like shove a lot of land into the bay, right? So I'll show you the differences between having a model with the bay and without the bay. And so the wind blows in this direction. We have it here. So it's like upwelling favorable, if that tells you anything. And yeah, and it's the same for both. They're exactly the same runs, but I'm just running one with the bay and one without the bay, right? And something important is that there are no tides. So really, the only forcing is the wind. And you can ask, like, well, how realistic is this forcing, right? I mean, nothing in this model is realistic except for the bathymetry. But how realistic, or how many of these wind events can we potentially have in the region? And so this is ERA 5 wind data. This is wind data, and this is wind stress. And what we found is that if we try to characterize a year, this is 2016, I think, of the wind blowing at these two stations inside the bay, we actually find that there are kind of like 100, on the order of 100 wind events similar to the ones we're simulating. So, you know, maybe it's not that crazy to use that forcing. And this is just like the yearly where the wind is blowing in a year, right? So predominantly towards the same direction that we used. Okay, I hope this works, because sometimes when we're sharing the screen, the simulations don't work. But I'll show you what happens in the first 2 days of the simulation. And this is the first 2 days out of 12 days that this thing runs. So the wind blows for 3.5 hours. And on one side, we have so here we have sea surface height. And of course, if we had the bay, since we're looking at the differences, we don't see what's happening in the bay, right? But if we, oh no. Yeah, that happens when you share the screen with animation. Well, maybe 7 seconds we can see. But if we look at sea surface height, we see that there's this gravity wave that leaves that radiates outside from the bay. I have a static figure, so we can look at them. And then this was nice. So this is vertical. These are vertical velocities at around 200 meters. And what we see is that the bays are generating internal waves. And if we had the whole 2 days of animation, we would see that they start radiating out, and then there's some interaction with this island, and actually we see that when the gravity wave leaves the bay, which is really fast, and passes through this part that has complicated topography, we see other internal waves being generated, right? Anyway, it's too bad that we can see. So we're probably going to have the same problem here. Okay, so but I guess the idea was that in the first 2 days, what we see is the very fast gravity wave response going outside of the bay. And these are the next 2 days, so days 2 to 4. And we see slower signals starting to move north along the coast, and these are probably coastal trap width. So we're looking at the signature in bottom pressure, and this is bottom pressure anomaly, and it has weird units. But what I really just wanted to show is the difference in sign so that we could see nice things. And so this is, yeah, bottom pressure, and this is sea surface height. So maybe let's see if it works or not. Yeah, it's not working. No. Yeah, it moves for a bit, but then it stops. Oh, it's too bad. Okay. Well, it was a nice animation of how, yeah, we see these signals that have different sign, and they start moving all along the coast. We also see that there's an increase in bottom pressure and correlated with sea surface height. That has to do with what the gravity waves are doing, right? So there's all sorts of, there's a zoo of signals going on. Okay, so I guess in summary, we see three types of signals: very long surface gravity waves, baroclinic signals traveling north along the coast. And the reason why I know they are baroclinic is because in the barotropic run they don't appear. And internal waves that are generated at the bay. And this is due to a very nice stage decay mechanism that I'm not going to talk about, but they end up filling the domain. And so the first type of signals and the third type of signals are in a manuscript that's under revision in JVR Oceans. And the coastal trap waves is something that Amelia Anderson was working on for her master's thesis. So, okay. So for the first type, the very long surface gravity waves, so we know that these are going to move, or their velocity is going to depend on the depth of the domain. And again, here we're looking at the difference between the run with the bay and without the bay. So what we have is really what the bay has generated, right? And these are selected contours so that we can see the evolution of these of the sea surface height throughout just around 3 hours or 2.5 hours. And so what we see is at the beginning, the gravity wave goes radially out of the bay. and it starts moving, but then afterwards it's not moving really radially. It's actually refracted, just because we have a depth difference. So it's the thing is it's going faster in this part, that it's deeper than in this part, right? And in the end, it kind of ends up wrapping around this bend in the California or in the coastline, right? And we see an amplification of sea surface height, especially in this little part that is the Santa Barbara Channel. And so the phase speed of these waves, it varies depending on where they are moving, but they are very fast. They're around from 90 to 200 meters per second. Their wavelength is approximately somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 kilometers. And their period, that it's about 4.6 hours, it's very nice that it's coincident with the bay's natural frequency. And the sage and everything that happens in the bay, it's also, like, I don't have time to talk about it, but it's that's very nice. This is also the period of the internal waves that we see. Okay. As for the coastal trap waves, well, the nice thing about looking at different things is that each field gives you a different information, right? So we see, for example, here in sea surface height, these are not the exact same times, but this is just like a little zoomed in version of this. But if we see surface and we see, for example, or sea surface height, and we see, for example, that outside of the shelf, and this is the 500-meter isobath, outside of the shelf, we see that, for example, sea surface height has the same sign, right? It's all positive. But if I look at what's happening, for example, in bottom pressure, I see that they have a different sign, right? So it's giving us different information, what we see at the top and what we see at the bottom, and this has to do with the vertical structure of the mold that the coastal trap wave has, right? Well, here you can see a little bit of the internal waves, and although we didn't have an animation, we can see how these signals move up, right? Like if we look at this, we see how it's moving north. And another really cool thing is that there is a lot of interaction with the little bays. This is Ensenada, if you know where CICESE is, it's around here. And there's a lot of interaction and amplification of the signals as the things go and move along the coastline.
So what's the depth of the contour you plotted?
500 meters. Yep.
Can you explain the units?
Sorry?
Can you explain the units? I'm looking at the vertical bar, so meters squared is seconds squared.
Oh, it's the bottom pressure anomaly, and it's I think it's per unit. So yeah, you still have to multiply it by gravity and density, right?
Okay.
Is it? Yeah, I think so. Then we can look at these signals along the coast. Oops, sorry. We can look at these signals along the coast. And so what we're doing here is looking at the Hofmüller plot. Here we have the distance along the coast. So this would be moving poleward. And here we have days. So if we take all the points along here, right, that would be like unwrapped around here. So we see these almost vertical lines that correspond to the gravity waves. And here we see the propagation of coastal trap waves. And here we're looking at sea surface height. We could do the same for bottom pressure, but I didn't do it. And then we can also look at coastal trap waves, and this is a longer time series. This is 9 days. Here we have vertical velocity, and here we have sea surface height. They have been filtered, so we don't see the gravity waves. And we see this very nice signal propagation. When things get to this part, that would be close to where we have all this complex topography and islands, we kind of lose the signal, or signal starts doing something weird in sea surface height, but we can still see the propagation in vertical velocity. That's part of the importance of looking at different fields, I guess. Another thing that's pretty obvious is that topography matters, right? Like even if we have these nice propagation, these lines are not completely straight. There are some parts where the signal does something weird, and Amelia found that these things are associated with changes in the slope and shelf profile structure, right? Although it's not that simple, because there's widening of the shelf and the narrowing of the shelf, and actually the papers, I feel like they all say different things about what's going to happen to higher modes and whether you're going to have reflection or not, right? So it's doing it with real topography, it's really, really complicated. But it's something that we would like to understand more. Sorry. And so for these coastal trap waves, we found that they have a period of around 26.4 hours, and that's larger than the inertial period, as it should be. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coastal trap waves. But they are close to the inertial period, which kind of depends on the latitude we're in. And she calculated this from amplitude spectra and lag correlations. The phase speed varies along the coast, and it varies a lot. And this has to do, again, with how the modes change and how the wave propagates and what the topography is doing, I guess. And it varies between 1 and 5 meters per second, and again from lag correlation. And of course, this is the whole wave, but if we split it into modes, different things will be happening, right? The corresponding wavelength changes a lot, but it's between, like, if we use these velocities, it would be between 97 and 409 kilometers. And well, the trapping distance from the coast can be anywhere between, it's around 50 kilometers. Sorry. And so she used a linear model to look at what the modes would look, or what we expect, or what are the allowed modes vertically for the coastal trap waves, using only the depth profile for the shelf and the stratification that we have. And so this is, can it bring smaller? And well, what we found is, like, it's really hard to put in, of course, the real topography, because then the model can, like, it's not going to converge. But for some parts, you can put kind of a smoothed version of the topography, and you get modes that look like this. I will stick with mode 1 for this one. The mode 0, I think, is a barotropic mode that should be really fast, and it's already gone, right? So mode 1 looks a little bit like this, and this is what mode 2, mode 4, and 5 look like. These are the dispersion curves. And so, but the thing is that the allowed modes are very variable depending on where you are on the coast. So it's really hard to try to kind of say anything about this coastal trap wave, right? And she did a nice job about trying to see from the model which is the dominating mode, and it's really messy. That's the conclusion. Yeah, and so the phase speeds for the modes go anywhere between 0.7 meters per second for the lowest mode to 3 meters per second for mode 1. And so, in summary, because I think I already took a lot of time, I think the bottom pressure observation can give us a way to measure, like, what's the effective forcing on the ocean, and this can allow us to improve predictions and forecasts. Bottom pressure can be affected by wind, driven barotropic and baroclinic signals, whose generation and propagation are affected very heavily by the coastline, and what the real topography that we put in. And I guess bottom pressure and sea surface height can give us information about, like, the sandwich, right? What's in between these two extremes, especially vertical structures in the water column, right? So I